Hi everybody, this is Katie Martin with REMAX One, and I'm here with Ken Whitlow, who is the attorney at Texas Regional Title. And we want to talk briefly today just about some legal options after Hurricane Harvey, because I know there's a ton of questions on everybody's mind. So one option is selling your home as is, and the aftermath of what will happen if you do that. So
Sure.
Will you speak to that a little bit?
Certainly be happy to. Okay. I've been faced with a lot of questions both at the title company level and also through my real estate law practice as to whether or not it's a good idea for a seller to consider selling the damaged home prior to the commencement of any repairs or renovations, sometimes prior even to the settlement of any insurance claims. In a perfect world, my best advice, and I think the safest position for the seller to take, is to try to extend a closing on a sale. If the decision is made between buyer and seller that the sale would be as is without the seller making any repairs, I think that the perfect world solution would be for the seller to delay the closing long enough to complete all of their insurance claims settlement paperwork, even the appeals process or the reconsideration process prior to the closing. The reason for that generally is that if the insurance company denies a claim or will require that another adjuster go out for a second, or we're even seeing sometimes third opinion on the amount of damage and the cost to repair, is that once the seller has given up physical possession of the house after a closing, it's going to be much harder for the seller to, or the seller's insurance company rather, to be able to send out an adjuster. Buyer's scheduling may not permit, a buyer may not want the intrusion or the interruption or the inconvenience. When they don't really have a dog in the fight, they're not entitled to any of the insurance proceeds. They're not going to have a whole lot of incentive necessarily to continue to assist the seller in furthering that claims process. So I think the seller might give up some potential claims handling responsibilities and options if that closing were to occur too soon. That said, buyers are anxious to close, get in, start doing their own renovations. Sellers are anxious to get out. They very often, understandably so, need the equity out of the property, such as it may be. They're anxious to shut off their no payment obligations if they have a mortgage on the home. So it's very understandable as to why each side may have a preference to try to close early. But hopefully these are just some ideas to think about and to give everybody food for thought when trying to make that decision on when to close and under what conditions of repair or as is.
Right, and it's going to require a lot of patience, which is something that I think people are kind of getting to the end of their rope. So.
Patience, understanding, and communication. As in almost any walk of life, any dispute is always exacerbated by lack of communication or even miscommunication. So I would urge everyone to be, Katie, as you said, be patient. These are very difficult issues emotionally, economically, monetarily. It's just very difficult to work through. So patience and communication, in my mind, are going to be the two key issues.
And Ken, what are your thoughts, or what are your clients asking you about SBA loans?
Very common question, hard to answer because there's not one set of checklists or check boxes to go through to help a homeowner make a decision on whether or not they should incur that additional debt load in taking advantage of what some of these disaster loan programs entail. Human nature, I think, would be and is to take monies as they're offered. That's what they're for. We, the taxpayers, have funded these programs, and we would expect those in need to take full advantage of those opportunities. But I have urged and even cautioned clients to look at the bigger picture further down the road than just their immediate needs right now. For example, let's say a home in the best of circumstances might be worth $150,000. In its damaged condition, let's say maybe half that, $75,000. But yet there was still is a mortgage balance due on that property, on that $150,000 piece of property, that the mortgage balance is, let's say, $125,000. So in best of circumstances it's worth $150,000. They still owe, let's say, $125,000 on it, but yet it's worth, as is in its damaged condition, only $75,000. It's going to take, let's say, $75,000 to repair it. And SBA offers a loan of that to them. But when you do the math after that, the current debt load on the house in that example will be roughly equivalent to what its repaired value might be expected to be. But you can see that it doesn't take too much shift in those numbers, a greater loan balance or loan to value ratio of the balance owed on the home relative to what it would be worth in its repaired condition, pre-damage, compared to what it's worth in its post-damage condition at present. And when you add the current mortgage balance to the SBA, let's say, disaster loan balance, to use just the SBA program as an example, it would be very easy. And we're seeing examples of where the loan-to-value ratios turn upside down, where there's more money owed on the home than it will be worth even after repair. And even
possibly for years.
That's the biggest concern. Assuming that a homeowner can qualify for the second loan, the SBA loan, and service both loans based on monthly income. They're repaying two notes rather than originally the one. But the bigger concern even is long range, where when a loan to value ratio is upside down in my term, and the balance owed on the home is higher than it's worth or than it will ever sell for within the reasonable future, then you end up basically with a home on your hands that you can't afford to sell, because there's not going to be enough cash coming out of that sale closing with which to pay off both loans. So it's that negative value, that negative equity, or again, like going upside down loan to value ratio, that really needs to be looked at hard with numbers crunched in advance of a commitment to make that SBA loan or again any of the other program loans. And again, that goes against human nature and immediate need, but I think it's in the long run much more important to be sure you look far enough out to be sure that you don't end up with something that's going to be a problem to you later, even though right now it might seem to be the thing to do.
Right. And so interest rates are very low, and I'm sure that's a lot of the appeal to it, but they're going to have a lien on your house just like anybody else that takes a mortgage out on it. That's right.
And I have a good point, because I have found that a lot of misinformation and misassumptions are that the SBA loan is free money, doesn't need to be paid back, may or may not be liened against the property as collateral to the SBA for the loan. It will be all of those things.
Right.
So it is a traditionally documented, traditionally structured mortgage lien collateralized loan, so that it's got to be dealt with at closing. The liens have to be released just as if it were a commercial or mortgage lender, a broker type loan. The devil being in the detail often too is in the fine print of some of the SBA loan documents, is that sometimes these loans are conditioned upon continued residency by the borrower in that home after repair for some fixed number of years. The fact, of course, which makes sense, but I've also seen people get in trouble for it afterwards, having not done this right. But there's also the obvious requirement that those loan funds be rolled into the property and in fact be used for what they were earmarked for in the first place, to repair the damage. So
which means keeping receipts and
that's right,
keeping all your
keeping receipts
documentation.
now. And it will take years. It was several years after Rita when I first saw this happen in my law practice. But at some point in the future, FEMA will get to the point of auditing the FEMA grants and the FEMA damage awards. It's same with SBA and their loan proceeds. So you want to be very, very careful that you understand all of the, the proverbial fine print and the terms and the qualifications and conditions of these monies that you might be offered and choose to receive, and are entitled to, of course. But you want to be sure that the fine print doesn't catch you and you become you regret later on not knowing what some of these conditions were early enough on to have factored those in to the decision whether to borrow or to accept these funds in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And I've also noticed when receiving pre-approval, I guess for lack of a better word, for an SBA loan, a lot of times you're approved for much more than what a lender would approve you for, just because they look at a different debt to income ratio. So they're not looking at your loan package as a whole. They're just looking at how much debt do you have versus how much income do you have, and they're basing on that. So I've seen people get in a situation where they're already upside down in it just because they borrowed too much money than what even the repairs are going to be. So just some things to think about as far as
Certainly.
SBA is concerned. And
These are all great programs. They are necessary. They're very timely right now. Of course, we the people, the taxpayers have funded these programs. Just be very careful that you understand all of the details behind them.
well, Ken, thank you so much for talking to me about some of these very serious issues. And just remember, if it matters to you, it matters to Katie.